So yeah, I want to talk and tell a bit about the Magento App Builder. And the first question, does everybody know what Magento App Builder is? Then we'll start with this one. Yeah, I realized I forgot to make any intro slide for me. So my name is Alex. I'm working in Comwrap Reply in Germany, in Frankfurt, working with Magento for the last 15, 16 years. So started from Magento 1. And currently the team lead of our e-commerce department at Reply. So basically not developing so much, more gathering experience from my developers and then making the nice presentation. Today shortly about the builder, and basically I would call it builder is the possibility to extend Magento without touching the Magento core. I guess a lot of you heard about fancy microservice world, and especially in the scope of Magento, who, as I remember on first presentations of Magento, they prohibited to name it as microservice. They told me, no, you should not tell it, like name it like that. Then it changed. But basically that's part of Adobe. So Adobe provided the service to build the microservice, which can communicate then with Magento. Technically can communicate with anything, but they advertise it as for Magento, and all APIs and services that's currently being built for the App Builder is Magento specific. So Adobe technically going to direction of not replacing the Magento code, rather build the service that will replace the functionality of the Magento. So they have, so this whole this infrastructure has a set of the stacks which are available for the developers or for integrators who will use it, is the services and the APIs. Currently there are not so many, but they're adding new APIs to communicate with different Adobe services. It's a CLI itself, so the common tool for creating and managing the new applications or microservices if you want to. Adobe Runtime, that's basically the whole this infrastructure, which is serverless infrastructure to run the microservice itself. SDK for developers to make our life easier, not so easy as I thought. Events. So yeah, that's, let's say, service. I would also name it like a first API, which is available so to execute different events on the service itself. I will tell a bit more about this one, and React Spectrum for the front-end part. So technically, a builder currently provides like two possibilities: is to build a single page application, which is basically just some page you're delivering on the custom URL for your customer, where you can put any HT assets behind, or use Adobe React Spectrum and have an app builder runtime, like an actions for the backend execution. So whatever you are doing, where any interaction required where user click on your single page application for any action, then it's may call the app builder behind to do particular action. And the second approach is the microservice, which is basically the same but without the front end. So it's any set of the actions you want to execute to reach your goal, basically. One example for single page application is I made it myself, just to know if they're using Magento behind or not, but I made it on IKEA when they had a Corona time. So technically, let's say you're going online, you're shopping, you place in the order, and order render it or place to the, in our case, Magento or whatever e-commerce system. Then you can build the two applications. One is for the end user, and another one is for the worker of your company, basically. And it works in a way that when I want to pick it up, I cannot go inside of the shop because Corona time, everything is closed. But I can drive to the parking place and then just open the app and enter my order number. So that's, let's say, the single page application where I'm entering my order number. It's registered the new event on the whole this Adobe I/O infrastructure and tell, hey, the new customer is coming. And then the let's say shop employee see the message, so which consume the event and say, hey, the customer ready to pick up the order. He's staying, let's say, on this parking slot. And then they proceed in the order, and the item be delivered to your place, so like direct to the car. You can put it inside of the car and just drive home. And that's one of the like example of using the simple page application from App Builder in connection to the e-commerce system. I guess they had to be the titles, I assume. I don't know where they go. So another example, what I want to talk today a bit more in details, that's what we had internally as a tool we developing for our customers in the, let's say, data import into Magento. And on my experience, I saw huge amount of codes which, while running any type of import, slow down the system so much that you technically cannot do the checkout processes, for example. Even if it's happening in the night, where you run the cron job, which import the data during the night, for example. What we're trying to achieve here is to use the microservice for execute the data conversions. So basically, in short, you have, let's say, CSV file on the S3 bucket, and when the new file appears, you can build on S3 bucket the webhooks which tell you, hey, I have a new file. And this event will register in Adobe I/O again, which tell I have a new file in a system, you can start to work with it. Then we have an application itself that which listening to events. When the file is appearing, it started to consume it and converting data, let's say from the CSV format to Magento REST API format. So this conversion happening outside, it can technically do any other operation. If you want to, let's say, copy the images from your client system to some S3 server, or not recommended, but to Magento server itself, and so on. Also, everything can happen there. So it means already you are not loading your Magento system with any of those operations, and you can prepare all data before you run the technical import. And then the application itself is pushing data to Magento REST API or to Magento Async or Bulk API. So it's then coming to the queue, but already on Magento side, and then import just execute on the background, and you have it products in the system. Yeah, that's an example, and I will go shortly here. Also in details, and as addition to it, you can technically also build a single page application on it, where you will add the front end, which reads data about the import. And again, you are not building it, let's say, on Magento itself, you're building it outside. You can have on URL, or you can try to integrate it into the your Magento backend, like with an iframe. And that's a good point, because like for some time in the past, it was not really possible by the reason of authorization, because you need to share the authorization between the single page application and the Magento. So when user is logged in an admin only, then he can see the dashboards. Currently, Adobe is working on this one. There is module, I don't know if you saw it, Magento EMS. It's a model which already part of the core, which is not, I would say it works, but it don't have the APIs on App Builder side, which can consume this one. So they have Magento part, but they didn't finish with App Builder part. And yeah, so how to start the project? So basically, you can register here if you want to. If you're a partner, basically, it's available only for partners currently, as it's part of the Adobe Commerce, let's say. Or if you are not the partner but you're owner of the Adobe Commerce system, then you can do the same. You can request an access to it, and you will get it. Then what you need to do, you need to install the CLI tool. That's technically, the only way to manage the code and to manage your microservice currently. So you need to install it. And then when you go to the dashboard of the developer console from Adobe, you can create the new project. You define that you want to have an app builder as a project, because they have also a lot of other services for the analytic, don't remember all of them. So yes, they have a lot of services there, and you need the app builder to start to work with the builder. Then you define the project title, name, and you can also define the workspaces. Let's say production staging. I never read or saw any limits on this one, honestly. And I even asked guys who working with Adobe App Builder, and they also told me they don't know. So I guess never ever tried to hit the limit there. Okay, okay, that's something messed up. Yeah, and after you're done with this one, you basically initialize in the app with an CLI command IO app init, which will ask you some basic question. Technically, before, like between those steps, it also will ask you to authorize, will drop you to the browser where you need to enter your login password. But that's happened once. And then you've chosen your organization, you've chosen the project, so it can be like much more than which you want to start with. Then you choose type of the project. For us, let's say the standalone application. Then you using the actions. So let's say to use the runtime actions from the app builder, which is basically quite general. So it's technically this one not required. Let's say will not tell that you cannot use events. You can use all of them. It's more creating the template for the project you want to use with some examples. And you can select also multiple. So in this case, like you can select enable actions, events, and web assets, and it will create your examples with them, so you can see how all this stuff works. And then you define it also which tools you want to have inside of your system. So generic will just create the generic project. You can also have analytic asset, campaign, target, whatever else. I guess this list maybe even change since I made this screenshot. And then which type of UI you want to use drag spectrum, which is provided by Adobe, or it's just pure HTML pages you want to build. And as a result, you got the working project, which can be directly used just with some dummy template actions and working UI, which deliver you the application basically where you select an action you want to execute and then do some other stuff. This UI already aligned a bit, so basically it's kind of sending a request to Magento where you define your shop URL, authorization token, then the request to the API, and then you will see the result when you hit it. I would not go in development here. As I told you, I'm not developing. Sorry.
Now it gets interesting.
So yeah, this picture you already saw, and let's say I would not say let's implement it, so let's go through the implementation steps, right? So let's say we have Magento ready. That's not a question. Otherwise, why we all here? We have any customer service which load delivered the CSV file, or you have ERP data at the same time, for example, even which deliver some other data which you need to send to your system. So what we have here on this diagram is we have an Adobe I/O. What is technically Adobe I/O? That's all the set of the infrastructure which allow you to build these services. And it has embedded Adobe API available for you. That's what I told already before. It says automatic scale of the infrastructure, so your performance will stay stable. By the way, it's part of the Adobe Commerce license, and I honestly don't know how much it includes. So it's more like on the resources you are using. Again, never hit the limit, but honestly, never had like a huge project there. And it's more when you create in the project with Adobe and you negotiate, hey, I want to use the builder, I have this and this demand of resources to be used. That's where you build your own stuff there, the contract. You write in your code in the JavaScript for the service, run in Node.js. You have available continuous integration and deployment. So you're using these I/O commands for deploying different applications. And the whole system is powered by OpenWhisk. That's an Apache OpenWhisk, which is serverless infrastructure. And Git basically, which is coming back to continuous integration deployment, Git you use in own. So that's your infrastructure. You want to place it GitLab, GitHub, wherever you're using internal to manage the code. That was shortly about Adobe I/O. Then we have App Builder itself, and technically the events of App Builder. That's an element which we would use here. There are three types of events you can use in App Builder. It's an Adobe I/O events webhooks. It's a runtime actions as a webhooks and journaling API. And yeah, if you want to use events, you have to go to your app settings and enable, like tell I want to use events. Shortly about each of them. So webhook, technically quite simple. I mean, that's name as it sounds. It's just a webhook where the event been fired and then the webhook being executed by Adobe. So you tell them if this event got fired, please, I don't know, send Slack notification or whatever else. Runtime action is a webhook. Sounds different. It's exactly the same. You just not defined it there. I honestly don't know why Adobe said like pushing and separating it so much on this one, but it's technically almost the same. Just defining the URL for the webhook, for the external webhook, you creating the App Builder application as a webhook. So you just send in the webhook inside of the app of some another application or of the same part of this app. And journaling API, that's my favorite stuff. Really love it. So technically, when whatever is calling the event being listed in the API, and you can access it. So basically, you're not only listening it, you can also read, let's say, a list of all events that have been executed within the past, see what the data they have inside, and then like different services can consume the events from API, and they consume the same events multiple times. So this kind of example of webhooks, you need to register every event and register every webhook. Here you can, let's say, not do it if you just want to read from the API of events. And yeah, it stores history up to 7 days. So in the last 7 days, you know when and what been called. You can iterate through every event in a history. You still have an event even if the webhook or whatever is failing. And yeah, I mean, it's useful if anything is failed and you want to refetch the event or you want to recall the webhook. By the way, so those webhooks will be visible in journaling API. So they're also available there. And even if you register on the usual webhook, but then later I want to see what's happened, you can connect to APIs, read the list, and then see what's happened. And how to register events, you can do it in 3 ways. There's available public API, you just need to have an access to it. There is SDK, or you can do it from your command line tool. So 3 different ways, and you first register provider, then you register event metadata, and then you publish an event when anything is happening. And that's an overview how it looks on Adobe App Builder in details. So we have, let's say, the events which subscribe, we have the webhook URL, and also have the unique API endpoint. So by this endpoint, you can get the data if you want to, or you can get the whole events for organization. You don't need, let's say, to use the URL to directly to event. Then what else? We may have also the key value storage of the App Builder. There is no database available like MongoDB, MySQL. You can use it if it's external, but you don't have it inside of the App Builder itself. But you have a key value storage which you can use. I mean, how we can use it in our case, that let's say for our application within the import is to compare, let's say, if data been changed. If the import application or source cannot tell you which data been exactly changed, you will run the system in the situation that you need to import again and again the same data, even if there's nothing happening there. Means we can use the key value storage for that, and we can have state. Let's say if we import in the product, we save in the state of the product, save in the hash, and then on next import we just put the data in the hash, and if nothing has happened, and we're not sending a request to Magento at all, so we delegating this task also to outside. And this IO state library of this database has a max state value of 2 megabytes, which is more than enough. Key size also more than enough, and then max total state size is 10 gigabytes. You can use of the storage. Despite last week I chatted with Magento guys and they told me another number. They told me 25 gigabytes, but that's official documentation. So I don't know to whom to believe. I want to believe to them, but yeah. How to work with it? I mean, super easy. You just initialize it and then you put in event to the like not event, but you put in the state there. Yeah, and then the last one of all this process is, let's say, the single page application. That's our app builder front end, where we deliver in the results of the execution of our service. And it can be built with React Spectrum. It can be just your own HTML, I mean, whatever. But if you want to have some fancy Adobe styles, you can use the React Spectrum for that. It's a React implementation of Spectrum Adobe design system and provides the components to make your website nice. I mean, and yeah, like one example, what you can have, let's say, the list of the operations being executed, size of the operations, execution time, and status of the operation your application working with. That also was a title, definitely. Okay, and that slide I added like really on the last minute because last 2 weeks I'm working on quite interesting project with like Adobe beta program for Adobe events, which is so they technically providing the possibility to track any events that happen within the Magento core and have it into the Adobe I/O. So they provided the extension. You register your event like by defining the, let's say, the service contract path, or creating the plugin for this element, or using the observers, and it generate like automatically generate the module which has the plugin observer for a particular element, and then this data is being sent to Adobe I/O, and you have all those events there. So technically, that's another integration from another direction, as I just showed, when you have data coming from outside to the system. So you could do it in the same manner where the data coming from the Magento somewhere else. So you saving the product, it's saving event, and then any other system can manipulate with this data already. We already found some topics where the Adobe guys need to work hard on it, especially when they send in the data, like the from product save the whole picture data also outside, because it's a load, but yeah, amount of the data is quite huge for that. If you really will save a lot of pictures.
Is that the eventing system Igor was tweeting
yes,
about?
exactly.
Okay.
Yes. That's it.
And there's a beta already.
That's already better. It's
Okay.
already can be tried. I guess there are only 3 persons, so but I know they wanted to open it like to public testing. So I would even not call it beta. I guess it's more alpha, because during even the base installation, we already had some issues where they need to align some stuff.
Okay, cool.
But in advance to them, that's the only Adobe service which provides the great documentation. I mean, I was very surprised how easy it's and understandable at what are they doing. With others, I mostly struggling to understand without asking anyway. Yeah, then shortly about the authorization. That's what I told before, that let's say Adobe has EMS, that's Identity Management System, which managing the logins. And let's say if you have a backend actions, it's a GVT token based, so it's JSON tokens. And you can get it in different manners from CLI, from the Adobe UI itself, or there is SDK, EMS SDK library. And if you, let's say, build an automated process where you want, like you don't want to regenerate token manually all the time, you need to use the SDK library for that. If it's, let's say, one-time action, you can use the Adobe UI for that, and then daily manually copy the token to your system if you want to. Yeah, and it's work in a manner that you request the GVT token. It's validating the request, generating the token to you, and then using the token to use the APIs, for example, of the system. Single page app. I mean, also possible to have it fully public. That's up to you. I mean, that's more like a standard Adobe authorization works. If you want to make it public, you can make it public. Also for the single page application. It's the similar, you also can make it public, but if you want to have an authorization there, you would use their Adobe logins. And if coming back to the module I told you about, which is part of Magento core already since 2.4.4, I guess I saw it. that's the way they want to build it, that you can use your Adobe account to log in Magento backend. So yes. Yeah, so technically the merchant who owns the shop, I mean, if let's say you're working with cloud, with Adobe Cloud, then when they're receiving the shop, they can add us via the Adobe UI to the Magento environment. Yeah, that's and this model is already there. I really, let's say, spent several days trying to understand how it works, and then guys told me the API is not ready. Thank you. I mean, they put it in the core release, but the API is not ready. So, okay, good. Yeah, and how to deploy the app? Basically, one command: app deploy, and it will do all the magic. Depends on the environment you are logged into. Then also one part of it is login. So the whole communication with Adobe App Builder got logged, and you can access via this library. I mean, you can log via this library within the code, and you can access the logs if you want to from a CLI tool, and you can also create a custom logger. So basically very similar to Magento core itself. Loggers, log the data, send log to files. Also, they have log forwarding available for Azure Log and Splunk. Never worked with it, never heard of it. But yeah, but that's only two, and then didn't saw any updates on this one. Yeah, but if you want to make a logs forwarding, then you can use on App Builder, which do the logs forwarding to whatever system you want. Yeah, and to access it also quite simple. So yeah, let's shortly wrap up. So will the App Builder solve all your problems and when you need any additional modifications? No, it will not. It will help. I mean, we definitely try to use it as much as possible, again, because it delegates the work we are doing from the Magento core. I mean, the support of the services, of the smaller services, easier than support of Magento who's being updated. I mean, services you update it yourself. I mean, you're not stuck to any update cycle from Adobe or from extension providers, especially when they update in much slower than Adobe Commerce itself. But also to delegate the work and load outside of Magento, definitely worth it. Will it solve part of the problems? Yes, definitely. And should invest in only the builder. That's my opinion. I'm not working for Adobe, so that's my opinion. That's what I've been doing in team. So yeah, and they also developing App Builder itself quite intensively. Despite the services like a live storage and product record, they're not using App Builder. But as I know, they use, let's say, catalog service, they would use the App Builder, if I'm correct. Yeah, so they will do it themselves. Yeah, and that's it. I'm finding that I guess there's something in this font. Yeah, there is like a questions I have to do written there.
Thank you very much, Alex, for this great talk. May I start with some questions?
Yeah.
So, first of all, there's only one language available at the moment, am I correct?
Yes, currently, yes. I also talked to them originally. They plan support to enable support, let's say, even of PHPs, and you can write the service on PHP that it's not there, and I never heard about this since last 1.5 years, so I guess no.
Okay. In my opinion, this approach is pretty similar to what AWS Lambda is providing. So you can build serverless microservices or applications, and then you get an API endpoint and some tooling around that, but it's very comparable to what AWS Lambda is.
Honestly, I mean, we working now on one workshop with the clients, and we proposing them in several cases use AWS and not in Builder, just because of the sake of complexity. Because App Builder is a very new product. Is I guess in live year, like approximately. I mean, it was first this project Firefly, I guess announced 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, but a Builder was a release candidate, I guess, on last Adobe Summit, which I guess was in March. So I guess it's less than a year. Yeah, and it's not fully done, but I mean, the goal here still, if we plan to stay with Adobe and we plan to stay with Adobe, all these new services are going to build around. And if we're starting to fully avoid it and tell, hey, it's not ready, we will come that it's ready, and Adobe service is working with it, but you cannot use, let's say, the services if you don't know how to manage them and how to work. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, we're still proposing areas on cases where a builder is not capable to manage.
Okay. And last question from my side. Why should you write an application in App Builder rather than as a Magento module?
But I mean, depends on the use case still. I would say if you have, let's say, very tight connection to core models of the system, it would maybe really hard to do it. If you, again, as I already mentioned, if you build in the application outside of Magento, you don't need to update it. I mean, you have to maintain it. That's still your work, but you don't need to update it. So when Magento update happening, and as they promise in API, do not change, means your application still will work with it, right? Also, the complexity of the Magento itself, so the size of the system, is really growing. A lot of code which people are writing become legacy very fast. It's maybe become legacy before being released. Means that also, let's say, the performance, the quality, the different elements where you not fully, let's say, checked and covered may cause the troubles. I mean, if let's say you have Magento with 5-10 modules, even there are some issues with modules, mostly you can manage them. If you have with 200 modules, that's already a big challenge. And every update will cost you more and more and more because you will definitely add features where a client is requesting them, which have a huge amount of legacy code. Well, that's why I prefer still writing the services, which is outside, which is smaller, easy to maintain. But again, it's every use case here is unique.
Okay, great. Thank you. More questions?
Is there maybe a good example to not use App Builder for a case? Because you mentioned it that you have other options, but is there maybe a good, easy one?
I mean, technically, any module.
Is it more in regarding performance, or is it more in utilize?
Yeah, it's more how easier to implement it as for me, because if, let's say you're using hope not, but if you're using Magento newsletter module, it has no APIs available, the code is legacy, but if client is asking you, please build me the feature for this particular module, you cannot do it with App Builder, because you first would need to build module inside of Magento to support the App Builder. And that's an example which is covered quite a lot of places in the system. Also, if you build in the module which changing heavily default Magento modules. So if you, let's say you have a catalog and let's say Magento catalog module, and you want to change the behavior of the module itself, because I mean, you cannot replace the catalog module yourself. I mean, Adobe maybe can, they haven't even the Magento catalog service built in.
Or a secret documentation.
Yes, exactly. So they built in the catalog module, which is also in beta, but again, you cannot do it yourself because it's a huge amount of work. So it means you need to extend it. And to extend it, you need to extend the Magento core module, and that would not work with a builder. Maybe in small cases. Let's say if you don't want to save the non-filterable attributes in Magento itself, and you want to delegate it to be stored somewhere, let's say it's a CSV format, and then you would want to read it from the CSV on the fly, but you cannot do it, so you can build a builder that will manage the CSV and will deliver you the API that you can read them on the fly. Because I mean, we had also such a use case that client has hundreds, thousands of attributes, and Magento will not handle this definitely. But from filterable, they have only 500 or so. I guess even less. Means we don't want to import all them in Magento. We just want to ask them on the fly for the PDP, because they use technically for PDP pages, maybe for catalog pages in one and other point.
But that first example you showed to us about like importing product data and yeah, exactly. Again, parsing the CSV on the Magento side or like parsing it on the single application and then delivering the data via REST API or something like that. And is it really then faster than to
That's
proceed the
that's a
data?
quite nice topic, yes, because the faster is write it to the database.
Yeah, okay, that would be the fastest.
That's the fastest. I mean, we are using the API approach because of the stability, which is more valuable sometimes than the speed. Because with API, it's checking the request, they go in asynchronously. You are not overloading the system too much. I mean, if you would not, let's say, execute 8 threads at the same time, like simultaneous request, if you're using the one queue, you are not overload the system. Means it's more stable and you rely on the APIs again. Yeah, that's
so it's more or less like a kind of message query. Then
correct.
It's possible then to just act as a message query. For
I mean, you have a queue on Magento side. You also have the reporting on Magento side. What was fine, what was wrong, because I mean it's logging into the Magento tables. Also, yeah, that's why we're using it for the import. Yes, if you would need to import per day 2-3 millions of products, I guess that approach would not.
Yeah, probably during the how you call it, changing process.
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Alex.
You're welcome.
And thank you.